welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be looking at language devices, what to look out for, how we spot them, and how to answer a question which is on language devices. If you need a little bit more information on language devices, go to this video here, and this video has everything you need on language devices. And by the way, if you see me looking down here, it's because my laptop is down here. We're doing language and structure practice today. We're mostly just going to be focusing on language, but we're going to touch on structure a little bit, but then I'm going to make a completely different video that just focuses only on structure. So the purpose of looking at language is to get you prepared for your GCSE questions which involve language, and we need to know how to differentiate between the two, because a lot of the time people get confused, and sometimes when they're answering a structure question they start talking about language devices, and that's where people lose marks. So firstly, we're going to start off with what is the difference between language and structure. So structure is how the plot is ordered and put together for the reader. So it's about how ideas are ordered and how they are structured into sentences, and how paragraphs are structured as well, the endings, the beginnings, but we'll go into a little bit more detail about that later. And the language is the words that the writer uses and how it impacts the reader. So when we think of language devices, the obvious language devices come to mind, such as metaphors and similes. But there are a lot more language devices that we need to think about, because sometimes we miss out because we think they're not there, because we don't actually know what they are. So let me give you some examples. We have metaphors, similes, oxymorons, alliteration, sibilants, onomatopoeia, personification, and prophetic fallacy. There are many more, but we're going to stick with these ones today. And again, if you need a little bit of help on the definition of these language devices, remember to look at the video that I told you to look at the beginning of this video. So what about structure? Remember, structure is how the plot is ordered and put together for the reader. So here are some examples of structure. We have order of events, punctuation, sentence types, shifts in focus, contrast and pace, time and place, paragraphs, effective openings, conclusions, anaphora, zooming in and out, and flashbacks. So I thought I would touch on structure, but we're not going to go into too much detail about it. So today's focus is language. Before we get started on language, we need to have an extract, and I've got an extract here for you which I'm going to put up for you guys in a second. And we need to read the extract and understand what the extract is about. The cool water danced at my feet, fizzing and bubbling like soda. Even though the sun is beating on my neck, beaming in my eyes, I can't help but smile as the wind caresses my face. Waves ahead roar and roll down, crashing onto the shore with a soft hiss, peeling away at the deep bronze sand beneath my feet. Without hesitation, I plunge into the blue-green water, my board pressed up against my chest. A chill surges through me, but a small wave washes it away. I paddle further and further, spinning my board around as a wave comes tumbling towards me. So this is about a surfer who's really excited about surfing. So you can tell that the writer really loves surfing. He's excited and he's just showing his feelings towards it as he's about to start. The language devices that I mentioned earlier, now we're going to start to look for them within the text. So let's get started with analysing the text. So let's start off with the cool water danced at my feet. So we know that's personification because we're giving the water human characteristics. And next we move on to fizzling and bubbling like soda, which is a simile because we're comparing using the word like. Next we move on to even though the sun is beating on my back, which is a metaphor as it's comparing the heat to being beaten. Next we move on to the wind caressing my face. This is personification because now we're giving the wind human characteristics again. So there's quite a bit of personification in this extract. Then we move on to the waves ahead roar, which again is personification, giving it human characteristics. Crashing onto the shore with a soft hiss, which is again personification. So there's quite a bit of personification being used here. The chill surges through me, which is a metaphor. So a small wave washes, which is alliteration because we've used wave and washes, which is two W's which are close together, making it alliteration. And then we have a metaphor, which is the wave comes tumbling towards me. So the question is, how do we get the marks? So we've analysed it, we know what it's about, but how do we get the marks that we need? So we have a lot of language devices to work with. So if the question was, how does the writer use language to interest the reader? We already have a list of language devices to get started. So how do we approach this question? It's almost as if you're writing a PE paragraph. You kind of follow the same structure when you're writing and answering this question. So to get good marks, you need to show detailed and perceptive understanding of language. You need to be able to analyze the effects of the writer's choice of language and select a range of judicious textual detail and make sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. So it sounds crazy in your head, but what you need to basically do is be able to analyze why the writer has chosen to use these specific language devices. And it's great to name the actual language device. So if you say this metaphor has been used because then it shows that you understand the different language techniques, and it also shows that you can spot them when you see them. So I'm going to put an example on the board for you guys to see. The writer's anticipation for surfing has been lucidly presented throughout this extract and fascinated the reader. So what I've done here, I've answered the question straight away. So I've given my statement. Remember I said it's kind of like a PEE paragraph. So I've given my statement here and then I've directly answered the question. I've said that it's fascinated the reader. The writer begins the extract with personification. So here I've named the language technique because remember, one of the important things we need to know how to do is be able to spot the language techniques within the extract. So I've named it personification, then I've put in my quotation. So remember, exactly like a PEE paragraph. So now we've put in the evidence. The cool water danced at my feet. Now I'm going to explain it. The writer uses the verb danced. I've zoomed into the word dance and I've named it as a verb, which is to move rhythmically to music, typically following a set sequence of steps. Dancing is usually done when one is jovial, and this emphasizes how thrilled the writer feels. So here I've spoken about how the writer feels. I've explained myself in detail. By using the zooming in technique, I've then given the definition of dancing, which then enabled me to understand exactly why the writer is doing it, because he's happy. By personifying water with this positive imagery, it has made the description more vivid and reveals how the writer feels gratitude for witnessing such a beautiful scenery. So again, going into a little bit more detail, we're still explaining here, we're still explaining the same quotation, but there's so much things that you can write about that one quotation if you break it down into bits. The writer then uses a simile. So now I've brought in another language technique. So this shows that I know exactly what I'm talking about and that I understand language techniques. Fizzing and bubbling like soda, which creates a scenic and tranquil image for the reader. Immediately, the reader is captivated by the beautiful description of the sea. So remember, what we have to do is make sure that we refer back to the question. So I could have gone off on a tangent and started talking about how it creates an amazing image and the writer feels happy. But the thing is, yes, it does emphasize how happy the writer is, but remember, the question isn't about the writer, it's about how the writer uses language to interest the reader. So the question is actually about the reader. So what we don't want to do is get confused and start talking about the writer and how happy he is and how amazing it is for him. I mean, if the question was something like, how does the writer portray his love for surfing, then you can kind of just talk about the writer. But because it's about the reader, we need to refer back to the reader. So at the end, when I said immediately, the reader is captivated by the beautiful description of the sea, I'm going back to the question, I'm going back to the beginning. So we've started off with a clear statement, which is what I meant earlier when I said that the structure is very similar to that of a PEE paragraph. So whether you're completing your exam with AQA or Edexcel, you can follow the same structure, this same language structure. You need to practice identifying language devices first before you get into it. I hope this video was useful. If you need any more information about language techniques or you need a further explanation about the different ones that I've spoken about today, put in the comments below and I will make another video to help you guys out. My next video is going to be on structure and it's going to be with the same extract that we used today. So stay tuned, take care, bye!